Lianjie was born on April 26, 1963. The world would come to know him as Jet Li. He acquired his screen name in 1982 in the Philippines when a publicity company thought his real name was too hard to pronounce. I'm pretty sure I butchered it. They likened his career to an aircraft, which likewise takes off as quickly, so they placed the name Jet Li on the movie posters. He's a martial artist, retired Wushu champion, film actor, movie producer, and philanthropist. Li is regarded by many as one of the most iconic Chinese film stars and one of the most renowned martial arts stars of his generation. But how did it all really begin? And curiously, how did it end? At the age of 2, Li lost his father, and the family ended up living in poverty as a result. By the age of 8, due partly to the Chinese government's involvement, Li started training at the Beijing Wushu Academy. Wushu, by the way, is China's national sport and is largely a performance version of various martial arts styles. It didn't take long for the coaches to realize that Li was different, that he had the physical capacity and interest to perform admirably for the glory of China. After just 3 years of rigorous training with acclaimed Wushu teacher Wu Bin, Li built his coordination, balance, speed, strength, power, and technique to such a high degree that he won his first national championship for the Beijing Wushu team at the age of 11. His prize was a trip to Washington, D.C. to meet then-President Richard Mo Nixon. At least I think that's what the M stands for anyway.
Wait, Elaine will settle this. Elaine, what does the M stand for in Richard M. Nixon?
Millhouse?
I told you so. He said it was Mo. You owe me a dinner.
Between 1974 and 1979, Li would win the title of men's all-around national Wushu champion 5 times, beating out all of the adults during his preteen and teenage years. After retiring from competitive Wushu at the age of 18, Li went on to great acclaim as an actor in China and made his debut with the film Shaolin Temple, a film he only got paid 1 yuan per day, which is much less than a US dollar. However, despite not making any money for himself, the film did instantly catapult him to stardom in East Asia and helped start the 1980s Kung Fu boom in mainland China. There would be several more films in China during the 80s before he relocated to Hong Kong, where he became the biggest star of the early 1990s Kung Fu boom there. He went on to star in many critically acclaimed films, most notably the 3 films in the Once Upon a Time in China series from 1991 to 1993, and then 1994's Fist of Legend, which was a remake of Bruce Lee's Fist of Fury. Jet Li's movie career in China and Hong Kong is credited with reviving Wushu and Hong Kong martial art films in the 1990s, as well as revitalizing the Shaolin Temple. The films also made a notable contribution to the international popularity of newer wuxia films. Wuxia literally means martial heroes, and is a genre of Chinese fiction concerning the adventures of martial artists in ancient China. Wuxia films first began in the 1920s. However, the popularity of the genre came to an abrupt halt in 1931 when the Chinese government banned them as they were deemed responsible for brewing anti-government sentiment. Although many films were still produced outside of mainland China, this ban would last within China until the 1980s. Ang Lee's Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon in 2000 was the genre's Hollywood film debut. Interestingly, Jet Li was attached to the film as the lead. However, he turned it down based on a decision prompted by a promise to his wife that he would not work while she was pregnant. The lead role would then go to Chow Yun-fat, another popular Hong Kong star at the time who was really beginning to make an impact in America. Speaking of America, the greatest country in the world, especially compared to China, Jet Li was inspired by the success Jackie Chan was getting abroad and decided to pursue Hollywood as well. He really wasn't making much money in Hong Kong anyway. Also, he wasn't exactly comfortable with how the Hong Kong film production was controlled by the underground mafia. It seemed like a wise choice to go to America, especially after his agent was mysteriously killed in Hong Kong. The opportunities in America were certainly there, and he was offered the part of Deacon Frost in Blade in 1998, but opted to do Lethal Weapon 4 instead. This ended up being a wise choice, as that film wound up grossing $285 million. Interestingly, that film would be the first time Jet Li would play a villain. It wouldn't be long before Li returned to playing a hero, which he did in 2000's Romeo Must Die. In this modern kung fu take on Romeo and Juliet, Li played the lead role opposite the late Aaliyah. The film was produced by Joel Silver, who was getting tired of American action films at the time and was looking to do something fresh. The film became a success at the box office, grossing over $91 million on a $25 million budget. although Jet Li's fans weren't too happy with the overuse of wire work in a modern setting. I personally thought that some of the action scenes looked absolutely ridiculous. After Romeo Must Die, a lot of hardcore Jet Li fans told him on his website that they didn't like the action sequences. They thought it was too choppy, not clear, not as good as his older films, so he thought it would be the right time for him to do some hardcore fighting with a strong character. The result? Kiss of the Dragon, a film I personally happen to love. This Luc Besson film really captured the hard-hitting tone Li fans were looking for, myself included. Jet said, "We use street fighting, hardcore fighting, very straightforward, no cables, just hand-to-hand or gung-fu to gung-fu." However, the film received mixed reviews, with some critics feeling that the violence was a bit too much. Let me know in the comments below what you think about that related to Kiss of the Dragon. Jet Li would then follow up that film with the sci-fi actioner The One, where he would fight alternate versions of himself in a multiverse. Then, Li would return to familiar territory in 2002's Hero, a highly polished wuxia film. He'd then reunite with producer Joel Silver for 2002's Cradle to the Grave, once again fusing kung fu and hip-hop, this time starring alongside the late DMX. Anthony Anderson would also return, who seemed to be a staple of Joel Silver films in the early 2000s. One of the standouts in Cradle to the Grave would of course be Mark Dacascos, who had an epic battle against Jet Li near the film's climax. In 2005, Jet Li would reteam with Luc Besson, this time in Unleashed, also known as Danny the Dog. Notable co-stars were acting greats Bob Hoskins and Morgan Freeman. In the film, Li also had a quite memorable battle against martial arts great Silvio Simac, which took place in the pit, which was later filled with other combatants as well as weapons. Now that was a brawl. Also an early appearance by Scott Adkins, who was really amazing in there. The following year, Jet Li would do Fearless, a film about the life of Lianjie, an amazing martial artist and founder of the Jingwu Athletic Foundation. Many people consider this to be Li's best work. Making the film was so intense that Jet Li promised never to take part in a martial arts film again. That promise was short-lived, as Jet Li would follow up starring opposite Jason Statham in 2007's War, and then in that same year, a film called The Warlords, where he reportedly made $13 million. He'd certainly come a long way from his start in 1982 Shaolin Temple, where he made less than $1 a day. 2008 would see the long-awaited and highly anticipated team-up between Jet Li and Jackie Chan in The Forbidden Kingdom. The two men loved working together, and Jackie Chan stated working on the fight scenes were relaxing and easy for him because the two men understood each other's similar rhythms due to their own backgrounds and training. The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor followed, which was interesting with its overuse of CGI for the Jet Li's character, mainly due to his limited availability in his schedule while filming. 2010 would see him as part of Stallone's mega action film The Expendables, which was a massive hit, grossing over $274 million worldwide on an $80 million budget. 2011's A Sorcerer and the Whitesnake would follow, which had absolutely horrendous CGI. In an interview with the entire cast of the movie, Jet Li mentioned that he got tricked into accepting the role. The producer supposedly convinced him that he didn't have to fight a lot, but the opposite turned out to be true. Jet Li complained that this was his most towering role to date because he had to hold back every punch against his opponents, who were mostly women with no martial arts background, while they went all out on him. He would then appear in 2012's sequel to The Expendables. That film initially had an entire subplot to be filmed in China, with Li playing a major role in that storyline. However, there were complications with the Chinese government, so Stallone ended up scrapping that part of the story and having Li's character jump out of the plane flying over China, and I guess do his own thing outside of what the audience would see in the movie. Li would reappear in 2014's third installment of The Expendables. However, his appearance was pretty much limited to 5 minutes of screen time in the watered-down PG-13 rated film that primarily focused on a younger team of Expendables. Ironically, that film ended up being expendable and seemed to have killed the franchise for a bit, as well as its planned spin-off titled The Expendables, which was to feature female action heroes. It should be noted that Jet Li will not be returning in the upcoming Expendables 4, which will be focusing heavily on Jason Statham's character, as well as the addition of Megan Fox and 50 Cent, the latter of which complained that the production must have run out of money because his head looks like it's floating off his body on the poster. That is kind of funny, actually, if you look at his head. Going back to Jet Li, The Expendables 3 would mark his last appearance in a Hollywood film until 2020's Milan. Around the time of The Expendables 3, Jet Li went public and announced that he was suffering with hyperthyroidism, and a photo of him appeared that shocked and concerned the public, as it looked like he aged about 20 or 30 years. The picture was much worse looking than 50 Cent's on the Expendables 4 poster, by the way. In 2016, Lee said he was taking fewer film roles and focusing more on his charity work and stepping away from movies, and that this had nothing at all to do with health concerns. As far as the picture that surfaced, his agent said it was really just bad lighting and a bad angle. While lighting can make or break you in a picture, it rarely ages you 30 years. As far as Jet Li just seemingly disappearing from film around that time, let's hear what Hong Kong producer, writer, and martial artist Bei Logan has to say about it all. I wanted to ask about Jet Li.
Well, that was it's very, I never really, I knew Jet in Hong Kong over the years in China, and he really, I didn't have any great warmth towards him. He blew hot and cold. He was somebody where if you were with people, like if I was with Donnie or if I was with Jack Ma or somebody, he was very respectful and nice. If you just saw him in passing, he would almost like ignore you. He is quite I found him not to have, in Buddhism, you try to have loving kindness where you make everybody happy. And I think his attitude was like, him and Jackie are like opposite reactions to the same cause. Both of them had really miserable childhoods where they were like, kind of trained and abused and, beaten to the point of being abused. And Jackie's reaction to that was, I was unhappy and I'm going to make sure no one's ever unhappy again. I want everybody to be happy. And Jet's was, I was miserable and now it's your chance to suffer too. So that's where he came from. So I always greatly admired him as a screen performer. And he did a brace of movies where he really knocked the roof off as an actor. One was Danny the Dog, which I think is called Unleashed, where he was between Morgan Freeman and Bob Hoskins. And if you can't learn acting when you're with those two, good luck.
Yeah.
And he goes. Then he came back and did his true masterpiece, Fearless, where if you look at his performance in that film, if you look at the deleted scenes, the sensitivity and the arc of that character, I'm not talking about the action, is sublime. So I'm separating the man from the art. I mean, I never liked him much as a person, but I admired him hugely as a performer. And then, of course, he moved to LA and very much pursued a happy family life in LA. And I believe he had these health issues. And I know there was one, he was meant to be in XXX with Vin Diesel. And my understanding is they were all ready to roll, costumes ready, contract almost done. And then right before, the insurance company refused to bond him because of a health issue. And then they called Donnie. And I remember Donnie called me, said I've got to go there. And I was just adjusting the costumes and everything. And he got a good payday and a nice platform. I'm trying to remember the time frame because I think that was before Rogue One. But anyway, it was a good opportunity for Donnie. But it fell into his lap because of poor Jet. And of course, the thing is, I always feel if I just say about everybody in my experience them, they're great, then it's like
it doesn't mean anything then.
Well, it kind of like sells short my true feelings. If I say everybody's nice, then people are going to, well, does he really like me or not? So a couple of people I mentioned, like Robin Shu, the minority, most people I work with, I much admire and like. Robin Shu was one, and Jet was another. Couldn't figure him out. He's very petty about things sometimes. But my understanding now is that his health is sufficient that he can have a rewarding life with his family day by day, which I would wish on him for him to be happy. Even if somebody in the past I didn't have a good relationship with them, I in general don't wish for them to suffer. I want them to be happy somewhere else in some cases. But I think his health is not sufficiently stable for him to do American films where he would have to be bonded by an insurance company. This is what I believe. And then he probably could work in China if he chose to. But I think he maybe feels with justification that he's got an incredible run of films.
Definitely. Yeah, and he blew up in America quite a bit. And
yeah.
So that was an interesting story. That was the interesting thing because he was really big. I mean, he started with the Lethal Weapon. I forget if it was the fourth one, maybe. Yeah. I remember Kiss of the Dragon. Like I was watching these things in the theater because he was really kind of
same director as Chris Nolan. Same director.
Yeah. It was cool because
Lady Blood Fight. God help us.
Oh, really? Because a lot of our guys, like Van Damme and Seagal, was starting to go straight to video. But at least you had like Jet Li and Statham doing these theatrical release martial art films. And you know, he was doing some really good stuff, and then all of a sudden,
one
like,
of their movies that I thought was really underestimated was War, the one with him and
Statham.
Statham.
With him and Statham, yeah.
Very interesting ideas, interesting action, good acting. But one of those that kind of just slipped under the radar. Maybe I think it was successful, but it wasn't like mega successful. Sure. No, I mean, he definitely. And going back to Tony Jaa, this was something nobody really got on Tony Jaa's case to look. You got to learn English. Never happened, and to this day. I still think he didn't learn to the level that Jackie did, even Sammo did, and Jet Li definitely did. Jet Li had a guy, I think his name was Jason, living in his house and just teaching him English day by day by day by day by day, and then moved to America and did the films he did in the States. At which point, you know, you see him doing interviews to promote Lethal Weapon, and he's relatively fluent. Good on him.
The character is very young, very smart, very cold. He never used a gun. He just used this kind of kung fu to kill the people.
So yeah, I mean, and he was back and forward doing movies in the States and then doing films in China. And I think the only reason he stopped is the health issues. That I also think because of the demand of doing any kind of action film, he may feel, quite rightly, why potentially reduce the number of, the years he had, like LIC, I hope that's not true, by doing action film. He's already done the best of the best. I mean, you line up his movies like, Fist of Legend, Tai Chi Master, he's got an incredible run. Look, I mean, I don't know. I didn't warm to the guy when he was here. I think the other thing is I was regarded rightly as Donnie's guy. And so that might have been part of it. Though I remember I'll tell you one story I would never forget. It was the Chinese New Year, Chinese handover celebration at Queen Elizabeth Stadium. And I was there with Donnie. We were doing a Fist of Fury show on the stage. And so I remember I was backstage warming up with Donnie, and then we walked in and we're underneath the stage and they were doing some kind of performance. They were going to move on and do the Kung Fu section of the celebrations. And then I became aware of somebody moving closer on the left. So being kind of bodyguard guy, I was about to push him back and I turned and it's Jet Li. And I was like, oh, and they greeted each other and Jet Li. And that in that circumstance was very nice and charming to me. And then they were going to do this thing with Jet Li where he comes up on a platform onto the stage and starts doing his Tai Chi and whatever, so Wushu. And so they were warming up and Donnie was doing his whole Bruce Lee thing. And next to him is Jet Li. And I'm like, wow. Again, I didn't have a camera or a phone, right? It was like Bruce Lee and Wong Fei-hung side by side. And I remember that it was just the most incredible thing. And I was looking behind me and there was a line of guys walking and it was Jackie Chan, Sammo Hung, and Liu. And I thought, wow, I'm really at like ground zero for Kung Fu tonight, Kung Fu movies. But if you ever see that footage, I think it's on YouTube, they have Jet rising up and he walks across a sea of silk and the music, the drums playing. And honestly, he really, as a charismatic person, I mean, even before, I think there was definite quantum improvement in his acting in something like Fearless. But even when you go back to Once Upon a Time in China, have you seen those films?
Yeah, back in the day.
They have that love story playing all the way through with him and this woman who's technically his 13th aunt, that they're not blood relatives, played by the wonderful Rosamund Kwan. And in the second film, she's in deadly danger. They're all in deadly danger, and these people at the White Lotus are attacking the embassy, and he sends her away, and she runs back, and she says, you're always the man in my heart. And then she runs away, and the camera just goes in on Jet. Fantastic. It's just transcendent. I always remember those moments. And that's, what made Jet special. A lot of people in China could do Wushu, right? And can do a lot of the stuff he could do. But and they've tried, but how interesting are they just in close-up? That's the question. And I think that's, people say, oh, he's so good at jumping around. And yeah, there's like 20,000 guys in China.
A lot of guys, sure.
Right.
When summarizing the film career of Jet Li, it's important to remember that he achieved everything he set out to do. According to Li, everything he has ever wanted to tell the world can be found in 3 of his films. The message of Hero is that the suffering of one person can never be as significant as the suffering of a nation. Unleashed in 2005 shows that violence is never a solution, and Fearless in 2006 tells that the biggest enemy of a person is himself. Li thinks that the greatest weapon is a smile and the largest power is love. As a Buddhist, he believes that the difficulties of everyday life can be overcome with the help of religious philosophies. He thinks that the fame is not something he can control, therefore he does not care about it.